Hey guys, Curtis with Wander with the Workmans here, and we are back. I'm going to cover a couple of things today. First, we'll give you an update of where we've been over the holidays, and then we're going to be talking about the repairs of 2018. So first of all, quick update on where we've been, where we spent the holidays, and what we did with our little break from YouTube here. First of all, we spent the holidays, Christmas specifically, in Tucson, Arizona. My brother and his wife, along with my niece and two nephews, live there, and because they live so far from Idaho, it's pretty infrequent over the past few years that we've been able to spend the Christmas holiday with them. They do make that trip every once in a while, but it's not an every year deal. So this year, being on the road, we were able to go to them and spend Christmas in Tucson, and it was really nice. It was really nice to get to see how the kids have grown, to be around family and friends for the holidays. We spent Thanksgiving actually traveling. It was a travel day for us, and it was a really nice day to travel in that the roads were basically barren. We had the freeways to ourselves, and we got to move from one campsite to another. There was great availability, but at the same time, it didn't quite feel right. And so we made a point of making it to Tucson for the holidays. So that was a ton of fun. We also got to experience our first mooch docking site. My brother set us up in the fenced-in backyard of his office, which made for probably the second ugliest campsite that we've ever stayed in. However, it does win and take the cake literally, yes, I meant that pun, for the best smelling campsite we have ever stayed at. His office shares an alley with another office business complex that houses a bakery. So every night we were treated to the smells of fresh baked bread or blueberry muffins or cinnamon rolls. So while it wasn't pretty, it was nothing to look at, it was certainly something to smell. It kept us hungry and our tummies growling the entire time we were there. Also, you may have noticed by the gap in videos that we haven't been putting out videos, and the reason for that is we took this time to decide what we were going to do with 2019 and lay the groundwork for our upcoming projects. Now for Havila, that means an entire writing schedule for her entire year, planning out which books she's going to write and when she's going to release them. For me, I came up with a project that I'm really excited about, but it's also one of those things that is not quite there. It's just a little bit of ways from being able to be announced, and so I'm just going to leave you with that cliffhanger tease that I've got something big coming up in 2019 that I'm really excited about, and when it's the foundation is firmly laid, I'll let you know exactly what that project is. In the meantime, we have gotten back on the road. We are at Elephant Butte Lake State Park in New Mexico. Again, this is another one of our stops in New Mexico using our annual camping pass, and I'll be putting out a video telling you about this campsite here in the next few days. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about today is I wanted to go over 2018, and a lot of people do this. I think it's just a natural reaction at the end of the year, or in this case the start of February, to look back at the year that was, reflect on it, see what we can learn from it, see what we can do better, see what we want to repeat. But I want to take a little bit different tact with that. I want to talk about the repairs of 2018 and take a look back at the things we had to fix and replace. I'm also going to tell you about one repair that you haven't seen. Some of these you've seen in videos before, but there's one that you haven't heard a single word about, and I'm going to tell you about it today. But first, let's look at our first repair, and that is we replaced the batteries in our pickup. Now, when we bought the pickup, we took it to a couple of mechanics, had them check it out, because it was, apart from being mostly mechanically sound, it was slow to start. There were times where you'd turn the key and it would just lug, and you'd test the batteries and they were completely drained. And looked at the dates on the batteries. They had a 72-month warranty on them, but they were at like 80 or 85 months. So they were ancient batteries in terms of car batteries. That's ancient. So while we were in Grand Junction, Colorado, we stopped at the Walmart and got new deep cycle batteries, but the problem persisted. And so in our conversation with mechanics before we bought the truck and subsequent visits to mechanics, they just said, well, it's an older truck and it's a diesel. Diesels are cold-blooded. They're notoriously heavy crankers anyway, and it's just old. It's just something you have to deal with. So we replaced the batteries, but it continued to be a problem. They continued to lose charge. They weren't charging. We weren't getting charging into the house batteries on our trailer, that kind of thing, which leads us to repair number 2. This one you saw a video of. This is repair number 2 on the truck. And it's a 2-part one. You did see the video on this one. First of all, we replaced the starter solenoid. Luckily, we have a fender mount solenoid, and that's a $20 part that goes out quite frequently, so that was the first place I started. That didn't fix the problem, so I went ahead and replaced the actual starter. And that fixed the problem. Truck lights up, and it goes. So that was our first 2 repairs on our truck. Now, along the way, we also had to replace the city water connection on the trailer. We pulled into Waylon Jennings RV park in Texas for an overnight, went to hook up the water, and there's a little pressure control spring inside your city water connection, and it just flew out. It just exploded. The whole thing blew up in my face. Luckily, we were close to a Camping World. We were able to get replacement parts, and then in terms of tools, the Waylon Jennings RV park is actually right next to an Ace Hardware, so I was able to walk the 30, 40 yards to get new tools. But that was repair number 3. It went in, it replaced real quickly, just a matter of a couple of screws, resizing the hole, and adjusting a hose clamp. It was a really simple fix, especially having a hardware store that close. Now, another repair that we had to make, and we made this repair in Farmington, New Mexico, is that our fridge stopped working. I mean, it was actually in some points warmer inside the fridge than it was outside in the normal air, and we just could not figure out the problem. And so this is one of those moments when a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing, because I did the research, I watched the YouTube videos, I looked up the manuals online, I did everything, and the best thing I could come to, or the best conclusion I could come to, was that the control board had finally gone out. It's a 20-year-old fridge. Not an unlikely guess, not an unusual guess as to why that was the problem. Went down to an RV store, bought a brand new Dinosaur control board, installed it incorrectly, I might add. I got my AC and my DC power switched, which luckily did not fry the board, which is a big thing with these AC/DC boards, where they have 2 inputs. If you cross those 2, you run the risk of probably 9 times out of 10 burning up that board before you even get it to work. But luckily, for some reason, this board held. So thank you, Dinosaur. Dinosaur boards, for building something so strong. It is like a fossil. Anyway, so we were able to find a repair technician in Farmington, New Mexico, when my attempts failed, and come to find out, all we really needed to do was to clean the thermocouple and some of the venting to get it to actually fire off correctly. He did switch the leads on the board, got it wired incorrectly, so we now have a new board, and we have a clean refrigerator system, and it's been working perfectly since then. Throughout all of our travels, I've had one consistent problem, and that has been the sinks. I've gotten to the point where I actually glued the connections to the sink drain and the drain pipes. I've actually glued those connections solid, because as you travel down the road, they would vibrate and come loose. In fact, in Wellington, Texas, we had to take part of a day off from the events at Nomad Fest so that I could run down and get a bigger channel lock, a pair of channel lock pliers, and get our sinks up and running as well. And again, I just got to the point where, after a couple of stops and finding that the sink was leaking again, that what was happening was, as we traveled down the road and it was shaking and vibrating, those connections were jiggling loose. So since then, I have glued them into a solid position. The sinks don't leak now, but don't tell your plumber friends, because they'll just slap me about the head and shoulder area. The last repair we actually made in, that you might have heard a little bit about, is that the blower motor on our furnace started squealing, and it sounded, I was hopeful on this one that my diagnosis was correct because it sounded like a bearing going out. And again, 20-year-old part. It's original to the trailer. And so we ordered up a new blower motor. Looked like a pretty simple replacement, and it is actually a pretty simple replacement unless you have the problem I had. In normal cases, you take out the fan casing, unhook the motor, slide it out, put the new one in, put your fan back together, and you're good to go. And that's essentially what the repair amounted to, except for with a 20-year-old part, one of the drive shafts that spins the fan had rusted to the point where it had swelled. Most people don't realize this, but rusting actually causes metal to expand across the entire mass of the piece of metal. And so I had to cut the old blower motor out with a hacksaw blade, and I only had about an inch of room to move the saw. So it took me about 3 hours to cut through this half-inch metal shaft. But we did get it in. The blower motor no longer screams, no longer whistles, no longer wakes us up in the middle of the night. And so that was our other big repair that you might have heard about. So here's the repair you didn't hear about. And the reason you didn't hear about this repair is frankly, this problem made me so angry that at the time, and even for a long time afterwards, I couldn't make this video. I couldn't talk about it on video without losing my temper. It was that big of an issue. But I think I've calmed down, so I'm going to tell you about it. We took our truck in for an oil change in Lubbock, Texas, to a national chain oil change place. And the reason I do that is, A, I like the convenience of not having to carry drain pans and that kind of thing with me. I don't like trying to find the appropriate place to dispose of oil on my own. It's just much easier to use a place that does that specifically and has that information on hand. It's also nice on a national level to use a national chain because your repair and service records, at least what you have done at that chain, carries along with you, and they can access it from anywhere, so it helps you maintain your vehicle a little bit better. However, in the process of getting an oil change, I was sitting there in the waiting room enjoying a free cup of mediocre coffee, and the store manager comes in and he says, we got a problem. I said, okay, what's that? He says, we broke your dipstick. Broke the dipstick. And he's like, yeah, come. I need you to come look at it. And sure enough, the dipstick is in two pieces. There's a handle part, and attached to that is the thin metal strip that goes down into the oil pan. And he's holding just the handle. And it's like, okay, well, what are we going to do about this? Because in all of my experience, if a shop breaks it, a shop repairs it. And he says, well, I don't know. What do you want to do? And I said, well, what do you mean, what do I want to do? He says, well, do you want to continue with the oil change because we've taken the plug out and dropped all the oil out of it? I said, well, do you have a tow service in town? Can you repair this? What are my options here? Well, he says, well, I can look up what the repair would cost. So he leaves me sitting in the waiting room for another 45 minutes before he comes back, and he says, well, the repair costs, the book says it costs about $1,000. It's going to require the removal of your entire engine, and we can't do that kind of work here. So what do you want to do? So, well, again, do you know of a local tow service that I can call and a mechanic I can get this thing into? You know, what are you going to do about it? Well, he's like, well, there's nothing we can do about it. I said, well, okay, fine. The dipstick isn't integral to the running of the vehicle. And so fill it up to manufacturer specs, complete the oil change, put in a new filter, put in the drain plug, fill it up to the 9 quarts that the manufacturer calls for, and I guess I'll go find a mechanic because I can't drive it without oil in it. And I don't know anybody in Lubbock, Texas that's a good tow. I guess I can Google it, right? but I was just so flummoxed, just so red-faced, angry at the time. And I couldn't believe that a simple dipstick repair would cost $1,000. I was able to locate a mechanic, went and I said, look, this is what happened. I don't know if I'm being told the truth. He looks it up. He says, yep, sure enough. Needs to be, the book calls for you to remove the engine, but I think we can get in there and do this weird contortionist thing and repair it. Ultimately, what ended up happening was I was able to track down a new dipstick and a new tube from the Ford dealership in the area. And I was able, because I've got tiny hands, comparatively speaking, which was a plus this time. I was able to do the contortionist move, remove the dipstick tube, extract the broken piece of the dipstick, and replace the tube, and get it up and running. So we've since then been up and running. But in the outset, I did complain to management. The other thing that came to my attention while monkeying around with trying to replace the dipstick was that they hadn't put the drain plug back in completely, and it was actually dripping oil out of the drain plug. And so, again, I was just so angry, just boom, to your head blown off, brains everywhere. I was just that mad. Anyway, did complain to their regional management. They had me bring it back in. They looked at it. They tightened the drain plug, and that was about it. I will say I continue to use that national chain because I realize that each and every one of the stores are individually managed and staffed by individual people. But like I said, I just was so angry at the time that I could not sit in front of the camera and tell that story calmly. Even now, I'm a little bit worked up about it. Luckily, I was able to take a $1,000 repair and make it a $45 repair. So that's some good news on that one. The truck is working fine. The dipstick monitors the oil level appropriately. We've since had other oil changes, and things have gone perfectly fine. So there you go. That's the repair you didn't hear about. That's our 2018 year in review in repairs. If you guys can do me a favor, I'd like to hear about your repair stories. Share a little bit of knowledge with us, because one of the hallmarks to keeping this lifestyle affordable is being able to do a lot of these repairs on the road by yourself. And so if you guys could share a little bit of knowledge down in the comments below, tell us about your favorite repair, your worst repair. All those stories are great to hear. If you do that, I'd really appreciate it. Also, if you like what we're doing here, be sure to like, subscribe, share, do all those things with that YouTube requires, especially the bell notification. Once you hit the subscribe button, which is, again, right down below me, it will turn on or make black this little bell notification right next to the subscribe button. What you can do is you can click on that, and YouTube will send you an internal notification every time we put out a video. That way you stay up to date with us, and it certainly does help us as well. So again, rate, comment, subscribe, hit the notification button, do all of that. If you'd like to keep up with us on a more spontaneous basis, you can follow us on Instagram. We are Wander with the Workmans on Instagram, and that's where we put our day-to-day random fun things, pictures up on a more instant basis. So join us on Instagram as well. In the meantime, you guys, we'll see you down the road.